And now, Lifestyles Unlimited presents the Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Over the next hour, we unfold your map to financial freedom. You'll learn how to retire through investing in single-family and multifamily real estate. You'll learn how to create cash flow and build wealth so you can have the time and money to live the lifestyle you want.
Welcome to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. My name is Al Gordon. I'm joined by Danielle, and together we're working on your financial freedom. Now, you're probably wondering who this gorgeous lady is who's hanging out with me. Well, all right, first of all, let me just tell you, she's single, okay? So all you married guys, you stay in your lane. You single guys, keep paying attention. But more importantly, what I really want to share with you about Danielle is the fact that she's decided to come on and she's going to tell us about real estate investing, and more importantly, her real estate investing. And we're going to sweeten the pot because she's actually a member of the Lifestyles Unlimited team. She helps a lot of our members get from, hey, I'm not sure about this real estate investing stuff, to, man, I'm on fire. I'm ready to buy my fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh asset, wherever they get in the continuum. And Danielle is one of those people behind the scenes that helps people realize their dreams. So there's a lot of things that we're going to unpack on today's show. And right now, I'm just going to say, hey, Danielle, welcome back to the show. I think the last time I had you on, I think we were living through a pandemic, were we not?
Yep, it was October of 2020, the last time I was on the radio.
Yeah, it's been a minute. And I know for a fact that your real estate investing has flourished. You as an individual have flourished. I mean, there's a lot of great things going on in your life. And I think what we just ought to do is we ought to just share that with the audience. And the reason we ought to do that is, number one, we want them to understand that there is a better path to whatever they think financial freedom is than the one they're on, because you and I have been on that path that they're probably still on, and we decided to switch gears. Now, I did it much later in life. You, fortunately, did it much earlier in life. Now, if you guys can't tell, I'm maybe 2, possibly 3 years older than Danielle. Yeah, you got a joke out of that one. But we both heard about Lifestyles Unlimited. Now, I heard about it on the radio. You knew somebody close to your heart that told you about this snake oil. I mean, this real estate investor education and mentoring company. Now, who was that?
So it was my dad. He was an avid listener of Della on the radio, and he would listen at work, and I would get these text messages, turn the radio on to 1200, and I'd be like, oh, and I'd turn it on and I'd be listening. And he did that for 2.5 years, was just constantly sprinkling in, hey, listen to this segment. Hey, listen to this. Hey, call in and ask him the question we were talking about. And so I got like these little secondhand radio impressions of the company. And I was like, yeah, hey, he answered my question. That made perfect sense. Or, hey, he was talking about something that I was just discussing with somebody else. So, I'm not a big radio listener, but I got those teeny little bits that were kind of just like breadcrumbs.
So your dad is inspiring you to do real estate investment. He's wanting to share with you something that he has discovered that's working in his life. Were you resistant to your dad sharing that with you? I mean, and the reason I bring it up is I have a daughter too, and I want the best for her just like Marvin wants for you. And I want her to understand what real estate investing is doing in my life. And sometimes, it feels like maybe I'm kind of steering her life for her, and I have to realize that she is her own person. I mean, was there a little of that maybe going on between you and Marvin?
Yeah, so I'd actually been doing real estate on my own through house hacking for about 3 years before I found Lifestyles. And my dad knew I was struggling to build my portfolio. So he knew that I needed something. And initially when he would tell me about the radio program, and then he would say, hey, they got an office, you should look into that. I initially was like, pay money for real estate? Why would I do that? I'm already doing real estate. So I kind of put it off just because he would just hint at it. And then at a certain point, he told me, you need to do this. I really believe in this, and I think you need to look into it. And so I trust him. And so I said, you know what? All right, I'll do it. And so I showed up at a seminar, paid to join and sat through it. And actually, we strong-armed my mom to go with us because if I was skeptical, she was even more skeptical. So we sat her in between us and said, okay, we're gonna make it through this and see how it goes.
Yeah, I remember meeting your mom, Kat, and having a conversation with her about, hey, how did Marvin get you involved with this? And the first thing she did was the eye roll.
That sounds about right.
You've seen that eye roll, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
She did not want to do this initially.
Yeah. she was the huge skeptic, but she eventually, told me the story, and she said, you know what? It actually has turned out pretty darn good. And she is a fan of Lifestyles Unlimited, although I'm very clear that she allows Marvin to do all the investing stuff. She's kind of hands off with it, but she's very supportive, right? Do I
Yes.
have them pegged? Okay.
She is like me. We're both very analytical and money-oriented people. And so she reads all of their reports and things like that, but she lets us do the heavy lifting as far as, hey, we checked into this deal or we went and met this person, and we just give her the Cliff Notes version. So she's abreast to the information that we're doing, but she stays out of the weeds and she lets us handle that part.
So let me take you back to the point where you made the decision to become a member of Lifestyles Unlimited, and you show up for the Financial Freedom. We were calling it the Financial Freedom Seminar back then. I know we've renamed it since then, but essentially it's the 16-hour class that I tell everybody about on the radio. Were you reluctant to take that training?
No. So once my dad told me to do it, and he'd already sat through it, so he could speak on what they talked about, and he was like, no, 100%, they're going to talk about things that you need to hear. So once he told me you need to do it, I really wasn't skeptical. In fact, when I joined, I actually hit the doors and went to the level where they mentor you on single family right away before hearing anything, because he had already told me that's what you need. I was already doing single family, so he was like, this is exactly what you need. So I wasn't necessarily hesitant or worried. I was trying to learn more about the program. And it's funny, like most people, I Googled it and tried to find negative reviews, try to see if this is real. And a lot of the things that I would find, it would be people saying stuff and I'd be like, that sounds like a you problem. That doesn't sound like a them problem. So I wasn't really concerned. I just was open to, well, let me see what they can teach me. My dad seems to think they're going to solve all my problems. And it's funny because we didn't even make it 4 hours in and he did.
Yeah, it's amazing how that works. In the next segment, we're going to get into that training. Stick around. Welcome back to the show. Hey, if you're just joining me, you've missed a lot. And I'm telling you, you've missed a lot because Danielle is on the show and she's like laying down what you haven't picked up. So how do you deal with that? How do you get back what you didn't see? Well, if you're already watching this on a podcast, then just hit the rewind button and pay attention this time. If you're listening to us on the radio, or if you're streaming it off of a radio station, and you want to get the radio tracks back, the best way to do it is to go to lifestylesunlimited.com. When you get there, click on the radio tab. It might say podcast, depending on what you're using to access our website, but it's going to take you right to our archive of radio shows. And I think we keep, a couple of years of radio shows there, specifically as a resource to you. Now, Danielle, you were mentioning as we were going to break that you attended the Financial Freedom Workshop, which is what we used to call it. What is the proper terminology for today's audience? What should I be calling it now? Because we just made that name change, and I'm so old school. I need you to help me. Can you help me?
Yeah. So now it's called the Investor Skills Intensive because it's intensive learning on what you need to do single family.
Okay. So did it get more intensive because we renamed it, or is it pretty much the same thing it was when you went through it, when I went through it, when all of the members of Lifestyles Unlimited went through it? What's your take?
It's the same information. We just renamed it to meet more of what you're going to get out of the program.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Okay. So at the end of the day, we still talk to the audience or the classroom, if you will, about the fact that there's information that nobody tells them. And we share that information with them about investing, about some of the myths that they believe to be true and how they're not true. And then we kind of fine tune them and we have them start looking at their own personal rates of return. Are we still doing that?
Yep. We go through an
And
exercise where we explain how to do that, and then we give people homework. So between the 2 days of the program, their homework is to sit down and assess, hey, where do I sit? Where is my net worth? What is the return on my net worth that I'm receiving? And then they come back to class and then we say, okay, here is what you can do to improve this. Here are some things that you can do to bolster your investments, bolster your net worth. And it puts it into perspective for a lot of people, because for a lot of people, they don't have, passive income. They don't have a lot coming in. So it kind of is that awakening, like, wow, I really need to get on this.
yeah, it's an eye opener, and I'm sure you see the eyes open when they do come back to the classroom the next day, and they've learned all the things that we've shared with them. They've gone home, they're excited, they start working on their homework, if you will, and the answers that they see on the homework are kind of devastating to some of them because they think they're doing so much better than they really are, right?
Right. Most of the time, people sit down and when they think about it, we tell them the exact things that you use in the calculation. And for most people, it's zero. And we tell them not to be ashamed. They're not alone. I mean, honestly, in most rooms, I would go as far as to say 60% of the room has zero. When you're looking at the things that you invest in and what are they paying you right now, yeah, people have stocks and bonds and things like that, but is it paying you something right now? No. Well, okay, then that's zero. And a lot of people think, oh, well, I have my retirement accounts or I have my Social Security. And we tell them, well, no, that's delayed compensation. That's not passive income. And so when you explain it to people, then they realize that they're not as covered as they thought they were. But at least at this point, okay, well, this is the journey and here's the starting point. Let's go from here.
Do you think the reality of a termination from employment or some other type of layoff kind of hits them square between the eyes, that threat is real, and that if they had to live off of their passive income, they would be in a world of hurt?
Oh, yeah, for most people. I mean, nobody plans on having that happen in most cases. You don't plan on being fired. You don't plan on being laid off. You don't be planned into early retirement. And a lot of people don't sit down and look at their 401k or their IRA and say, how much is in here? And if I had to live off that 4%, how long would I last or what would I be receiving? They just hope for the best. And unfortunately, for your future, you can't just hope and think that it'll be okay. You really have to take an active role.
What do you think is the most eye-opening thing, besides maybe that exercise that we talked about, but what is the most eye-opening thing that you think the education provides the student in the current course of instruction that we offer?
Well, so it's funny because there's two different kind of messages that are taught. There's a specific track that they're talking about on the Saturday portion and a specific track on the Sunday portion. So on Saturday, I think people will leave that event thinking, I can actually do this. When you're thinking about real estate, but you don't know where to start, it can be overwhelming. You think about, I don't want to do something. I don't want to lose my shirt. I don't want to get taken advantage of. And so you talk yourself out of it. And by the end of Saturday, you will leave thinking, I know exactly what I need to do to get started and to go buy a property. And then on Sunday, the message that most people should be leaving with is that our government is set up to have basically tax shelters with real estate. And this is how you can take advantage of that. So that high income earner, that doctor, that lawyer, if they supplement their income with real estate, especially if they're married, they can save a lot of money on taxes. And that for most people is just that aha moment. Like, I didn't even realize I could do this.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, for me, even though I owned real estate before becoming a Lifestyles Unlimited member, I didn't really look at the tax advantages. I didn't really look at the 5 ways we make money in real estate on the single family side. I just thought it was appreciation. I thought it was just hang on, negative cash flows, just part of the game. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was invested in real estate, so what could go wrong, right?
And as long as you're making some money, most people are like, hey, this is good. I'm doing it right. And it's like, yeah, but you could be doing better. And people don't think about that. They're like, oh, you're right. Oh, hey, like you said, well, in a couple years when I sell this, it'll be worth big money, but I'm negative cash flowing right now. And you're like, wait, you can do both. People don't realize that.
Yeah, they don't because, I mean, society doesn't teach them that there's a different way. It is reliant upon an organization like Lifestyles Unlimited to help people identify that they've got a poison pill in their future that may explode at any time, and it could cause them irreparable, I can't even say the word, harm is the word I want to get to. And that's a bad scenario. I mean, where I buy my groceries, there half of the baggers are like 18 years or younger. The other half are older than I am, and I'm 62.
Yeah.
That tells me there's a problem in our society, don't you think?
Yeah, you would hope that that person is enjoying retirement and not slaving away in their 70s or their 80s, certainly.
Well, one thing I know about you, Danielle, is you're not going to be slaving away in your 70s or 80s unless that's what you choose to do because you're a real estate investor and you're building a portfolio for the future. When we come back in the next segment, we're going to talk to Danielle, or actually have Danielle talk to us about that portfolio. You're going to be amazed. Stick around. Welcome back to the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show. My name is Al Gordon. I'm joined by the beautiful Danielle. And together, by the way, she's single. And together, we're working on your financial freedom. So Danielle, what I want to do in this segment is I really want to get into your investment journey. Now, let me kind of start the segment off this way because I got to pick up where we left off literally almost, well, a little over 5 years ago, right? At that time, you had a couple of investment properties under your belt, and you were in the process of improving the house that you lived in, that you owned, to sell it. And the game plan was you were going to extract money out of that asset. And I'm pretty sure you did it tax-free. We could talk about that if you want. And you took that money and you bought additional assets with it. Is that what happened?
Yep.
All right, pick it up from there and fill me in on the last 5+ years.
Perfect. So initially I started in single family, and at a certain point, I started selling it down because I started deciding that I wanted to look into the multifamily realm. And so the best source of money was the actual residence that I was living in. I'd had my house for 13 years and I was sitting on a huge chunk of debt equity. And I kept getting offers that were like, hey, refinance and take money out. And I was thinking about doing that. And then one day I sat down and said, what would I make if I rented it back out? What would I make if I sold it? And what would I make if I refinanced it? And at the time, it was in 2022. I mean, people were just paying ridiculous amounts for houses. I remember seeing stuff where they were saying in Austin, Texas, people were spending $80,000 over asking price, meaning going to a closing table, they had to pay that out of pocket because it was $80,000 over the value. And so I was hoping to capitalize on that. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and sell it. I'm not attached to this house. It was the house that I lived in, and I'd house hacked it and then moved back in to fix it and then moved back out. And so I did that numerous times. And so I ended up selling it, and I ended up getting $20,000 more than what I was asking for, which is still, for me, that was $20,000 more than I had. I'll take it. And I ended up walking away with about $160,000 just on that one property sale. And I sold all the other single family that I had. So at that point, I had been squirreling money away. And so when I made the decision to fully switch to multifamily, I had a good chunk of money to use. I had $250,000. And it's funny because in 2022, I had several people beat me up at the expo because I, would tell people, well, I kind of want to syndicate. I kind of want to be a lead. Maybe I want to be an IRO, but I'm just saving up money. I'm squirreling money away. And they'd say, oh, well, how much do you have? And I'd say, oh, I got about $70,000. And no joke, people about beat me up because they're like, what are you doing? Why is it just sitting around in your savings account making less than 1%. And they're like, you should really deploy that out. And so I said, yeah, I'm still building my net worth to be an IRO or to syndicate myself. So I said, yeah, I'll go ahead and deploy it out. And so that was kind of the cornerstone for, hey, let me go ahead and sell everything down and just deploy it into multifamily. And so I actually at one point had 10 multifamily deals. I've actually had 2 go full cycle. So currently right now I have 8 and doing really well. It's so funny. I actually have gotten, we're only 6 days in now, or, the whatever day that you're listening to this. By May 5th, I'd already had 4 distributions this month alone, and I'm expecting 2 more. So, it's going really well.
So when you say distributions, is that the passive income that we were alluding to earlier in the show?
Yes, so we jokingly call it mailbox money, although nobody gets checks in the mail. I mean, if I had to write a check, I'd be so frazzled to find a checkbook nowadays. But yeah, so the deals that I'm in, basically every 3 months or whenever they have funds that they're able to release back to the folks that invest with them, they send a distribution. So you get an ACH deposit into the account that you've provided them. And it's nice to just wake up and check the bank account and say, who's this from? Because it's funny, they come through a name that's not necessarily the name of the property. So like, who's this again? But it's exciting.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. And how much work are you putting in to get that distribution? I mean, you put it in like 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 40 hours a week to get that money?
I have this arduous task that I have to read reports. And I do that. Usually I save until I get all 8 of them and I read them in a single weekend. And it probably takes me maybe not even an hour, 40 minutes to read through them. And, oh, wow, that's what's going on. Oh, yeah, that's tough. Or, oh, hey, that's really exciting. They're really about to do some things. My only role is to read the reports and to ask questions if there's something that I don't understand, if something doesn't look right, or, if like, hey, well, when are we thinking we're going to do this? My whole job is to trust that syndicator, trust that lead, and read the reports and, be along for the ride. So very minimal work.
Yeah, it is very minimal work because that's how I've done a lot of my investing too. And initially I thought, wow, this is going to take a lot of my time, but like you, I found out it doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, you've got it dialed into what, about 40 minutes?
40 minutes a month?
Yeah, a month to read and not just a report, like 8 reports, but the reports, they're all similar. I mean, they're different properties, but the reason they're similar is because, well, Lifestyles Unlimited teaches all of our syndicators, our lead investors, if you will, how the process needs to look, what right looks like, and all they do is they replicate what right looks like. So when we're getting our reports and things like that, it's the same type of information based on the specific property replicated across, in your case, 8 different properties, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that just makes it easy.
Yeah.
So what happens now? You mentioned if you saw something in the reports that caught your eye, maybe you didn't understand something, or maybe you had a question about why something was done. Is that something where you can go directly to the lead investor and have a conversation, or is there some type of mitigating process you have to go through to get that resolved?
So I actually have a couple of resources. So for certain things, it may be appropriate to just email that lead and say, hey, I saw this in the report. Could you explain this a little better? Or, what does this mean? And in most cases, they're going to email you back right away. Or in some cases, maybe if more than one person asks the same question, they'll email all of their investors and say, hey, we got a lot of people that wondered about this. Let me explain. So I can always reach out to my syndicator. If there's a problem and I'm like, maybe I don't understand. Maybe I'm not comprehending this right. And maybe it's a me problem. It's not a them problem. I can actually go to other people that are invested in that deal with me. We always joke and say, it's like a family reunion. There might be 120 people and you look at your list and you're like, I know half of these people. We hang out and we have lunch and whatnot. And so I can dial them in, call them, text them and say, hey, did you look at your report? It said this. What does this mean? And in numerous cases, I've had people way more experienced than me say, oh yeah, this is what this means. So it saved me that embarrassing email of being like, I don't know what I'm doing, kind of thing. To the lead, I could say, oh, okay, I got clarification and now I'm good. And then if both of those don't work, I can always go to Lifestyles and say, hey, I'm not going to necessarily give them exact information from my dealer, but I can say, hey, I had this weird question about this that's happening. Could you help me understand? And I have mentors that I can go to, and they could say, oh yeah, this is probably why they'll do that. And they can give me some questions to ask my syndicator, ask my lead to help me get a better understanding. So I've got all kinds of resources.
Plus, you've got the education that you went through, which probably helps you solve 97, maybe 98% of all your questions, right?
Right. A lot of it comes with
Yeah,
experience, and the more you do it, the more it makes sense.
yeah, because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily that anything was done wrong. It's just a matter of understanding what was done and why it was done.
Right.
And sometimes, it's like the telephone game. I start here, we go to the next person, we go to the next person. By the time it goes full cycle, it may
Story's
not
totally
be
different.
100% what it was, right? But you get the answers you're looking for. You've got ways to get the answers that you need, and it's all designed to make you a better real estate investor. In the next segment, we're going to talk about what Danielle's up to lately. Stick around. Welcome back to the show. So Danielle, you've come a long way in the last 5 years. You've gone from owning a house that had a lot of built up equity that you weren't taking advantage of. You divested yourself of that house. Did you pay any taxes on that house, by the way? Did you have to pay any capital gains taxes?
So, no, because of the fact that I lived in it, they have this special caveat. And so that's kind of why house hacking can be a good thing, is if you live in it 3 of the last 5 years, I believe, or within a 3-year or a 5-year period, 3 of those 5 years, you can count it both as your residence again. And so because it's your personal residence, when you sell it, you are not subject to capital gains. Now, when you sell a rental property that you never lived in, yes, you are most likely going to be subject to that 15% capital gains, or it can be more if you've got a really huge net worth. But there is ways to mitigate that as well. So you got to talk to, your CPA or your tax person to help you figure that out. But no, I didn't pay any taxes on that $160,000. It was great.
So you're able to take all that money and move it into investments that you wanted to make, right?
Yep.
And over time, those investments have grown, they've flourished. Some of them you mentioned have gone full circle, which means they've been divested. You got all your money back plus the gains that you earned on the properties. And what have you done with that money? Is that money in hold for a specific reason, or did you turn around and already reinvest that money?
So a couple of things, like when the first time I had a property sell, I went ahead and just redeployed that right back out to another property. We're always looking for the ways to mitigate the taxes. And so it's funny, when I talk to a syndicator, I always say, are you planning on doing cost segregation? I'm looking for those write-offs. I got to build up my write-offs. So the first property that sold, I did just 100% move to another property. And then the other funds that I've received, I kind of have in my savings account, because unfortunately, when I sold all my single family rentals, I was this diligent person who would track everything. I'd buy a book for my real estate. I'd go to a training class. I'd have, I'm a member of the apartment association. I would have all these things that I'm collecting, I'm learning, but they're helping my business. And I would take them to the CPA, here's my paper, and give it to him. And the year after I sold everything, I went to give it to him, and he said, that's great. I can't use any of this because you only have passive income. So now at this point, I'm kind of just saving up to buy single family again. I didn't really know that going into it that I would lose that. And it didn't cost me any money, but I could have been maximizing money that I could be getting back. So I'm thinking about going ahead and adding a few single family back to my portfolio. But anytime something sells or refinances and I get a chunk of money, it sits in a holding account. And then when it gets to a certain dollar amount, I start looking for, where am I going to put this? And it's a case by case basis. So what's going on at that point in the market? Do I want to do another multifamily deal? Do I want to do a single family deal? What do I want to do? And I'm the type of person where I reassess my portfolio at least twice a year. I look at it and say, okay, hey, are these still going the way I want? Do I want more of this type of deal, or do I want to change my target? change markets and things like that. So for the next property that's purchased, I can have a plan of what I'm looking for.
That's pretty cool because what you just said you're strategic, you're focused on the operations, and you're looking for the tactical advantage to do the things that you want to do. And it sounds like single family is back in play. I think it's a good viable option, especially considering your current situation. What markets are you looking at?
So I actually live in the Central Texas area was what we call it. But I live in New Braunfels, Texas, which is halfway between San Antonio and Austin. Every rental property that I've ever had, aside from that one that was my residence, have always been in the San Antonio area. And I'm not opposed to other areas, but that's just an area that I'm very, very familiar with. Like I can jokingly, someone can say, "What do you think of this neighborhood?" And there's most of the neighborhoods that people do rentals I know about. I've spent countless hours tracking and learning about these areas so I know where I want to buy and where I don't want to buy. But even saying that, every property in San Antonio that I've ever had has been an hour away or an hour and a half. So I handle them like as if they could be in another state or, anywhere. I do everything basically remotely. I like everything in writing, and I set that expectation when someone's a resident and they live in one of my properties. I let them know, here's how you're going to communicate. Here's what you need to do if something happens. Everything's in writing. I actually have a Google Voice number, and I tell people it doesn't ring. Don't call me. If you call me, it's going to transcribe it and it's send it to me as a text. And I'm not going to call you back. I'm going to text you back. I want everything in writing. That protects them and me.
Sounds like you're a pretty astute businesswoman. What do you think?
I try. I try to do my best.
Do you think Lifestyles Unlimited helped you develop that skill set?
So some things I did know, but Lifestyles really did. And that's that Saturday portion of the seminar. They really go over a lot of those best practices for setting you up for success. There's things that people don't think about, and they will explain things and be like, "Oh, hey, why don't you try doing this, this, and this? This protects your private information." They explain how you communicate with people so they're not calling you at all hours of the day and night. And it's funny because before I found Lifestyles, I did have residents that would call me at 2 o'clock in the morning with a question about something, not even something broke, just a question. And it's like, why are you calling me? Like, do you not sleep like normal people? So Lifestyles gave me some more tools to add to my success to make things, more seamless, more protection. And like I said, it's not only protection for myself, it's also protection for that person that lives there. If I do something squirrely, hey, they have it in writing too.
Hey, let me switch gears on you because you actually wear a hat as part of the Lifestyles Unlimited team. What is that fancy title that you have? What do they call you within Lifestyles Unlimited?
So I guess I should back up and say I initially I've gone through a couple of role changes, but for the longest time, I've been their national coordinator. And so what that means is I travel around the country and I facilitate the seminar that we do. So I work with a single family mentor and a presenter, and, we go to Chattanooga, Kansas City, St. Louis. I was actually just in Jacksonville, Florida, Anaheim, Seattle. I go to all kinds of places, and I work with the venue that we are at to make sure that the event that we have goes seamless for the members that attend. I want it to be as professional and put together as possible. When they get there, it just flows. So that's what I do. And I actually just in February got a promotion. So now I'm not the national coordinator, I am the national director. So I'm ahead of the whole national program. And then I'm actually also an IT coordinator. So within Lifestyles Unlimited, we have member services, which is where I've been the whole time I've worked here. And I now facilitate between IT and member services to make sure everything on the technical side that our team needs, I can help them get it done. Problems that arise, issues with software, I do that too.
Well, you've got some very important hats, and I see how all those things work. Now, we're actually going to be in Chattanooga, Tennessee, at the end of May. Are you responsible for making sure that comes off without a flaw?
So we've got some people that are spreading their wings. So it's, been a while. I've been the only one doing most of the traveling for a couple of years. So I'm actually not going to be the one going, but the person who's going is Haley. And I know that
Oh,
she's going to be
Haley.
excellent because she's gone to a couple of events with me and been, my assistant while learning what I do. And so she's going to spread her wings and do it herself this time. But I do track that event, and I'm one of the people who will contact members and invite them to the event, answer any questions about, what are they going to learn? Where do they need to go? I do handle things like that as well.
Well, since you said what are they going to learn? What are they going to learn?
So we've said this before. It is a 16-hour seminar. So it's 2 days, 8 hours each day. On Saturday, they're going to go through why we do what we do. The mindset behind it is very important, because the mindset that an investor has is not the same mindset that, a person who's been working 20, 30, or 40 years has. We're on a totally different plan. And so first we go over the mindset, and then we go through all of the steps that you're going to need to do single family rentals. How do you get pre-approved? How do you find a realtor? Where do you find what properties you want to look for? Like, where are they going to be at? What level of need does that property have? Is it going to need rehab, or is it going to need nothing? I always did paint readies. I don't do make readies and huge rehabs. I do paint readies. If I can't get it at Home Depot, I'm too lazy to do it. But, what level of rehab are you comfortable with? And then once you buy the property and you do the rehab, what do you do at that point? Well, you're going to refinance it and you're going to rent it out. And then once you're rented, what do you do after a year? What do you do after 2 years? What do you do if something breaks? What do you do if somebody wants to move out? We go through all of those steps with a fine-tooth comb, and we give folks a book. They write their own notes. We tell them every time you come back to this seminar, bring your book, add new notes, because you're going to hear something this time you didn't hear the last time. And we go through all of that information. And that already sounds like a fire hose of information, but wait, there's more. And the next day, we're going to talk about things like multifamily, partnerships, why we do multifamily, and why there's a tax benefit. So, we go through everything that you need to know to start your journey, and then decide when you want to take the next step, which in most cases, the next step is some form of multifamily, whether you buy your own, you syndicate, or you invest passively with somebody.
Yeah, it is a fire hose of information. It does take 16 hours to get it done, but when it's done, you are educated, you are ready to go, and you would be just like Danielle and I. You would be a sophisticated real estate investor. Danielle, I want to thank you for being on today's show. I think you made a difference in somebody's life. And by the way, all you single guys, she is single too. So if you want to get a hold of Danielle, send me a text. Or don't send me a text, but send me an email at askal@luinc.com. That's askal@luinc.com, and I'll pass it on for you. Thank you.
You're going to get a lot of weird emails.
Thank you for listening to Lifestyles Unlimited's Real Estate Investor Radio Show. Ready for more of the map? Visit lifestylesunlimited.com. Explore our videos and articles. Click on the radio tab to access past show podcasts. View the radio show schedule and listen to our best of radio shows. Want to continue the conversation? Follow Lifestyles Unlimited on Facebook today. We want to meet you as well. Sign up for a free workshop at lifestylesunlimited.com. Until next time, remember, it's not the money, it's the lifestyle.
The information and opinions you hear on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show are those of the hosts, guests, and callers and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this station, its affiliates, its management, or advertisers. The Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented on the Lifestyles Unlimited Real Estate Investor Radio Show constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.